So we're going to go ahead and get started. It's 2 o'clock, and we're going to have a lot of people, I'm sure, that'll be joining us as we get started. So we'll be patient with everyone as they click on. So a couple of things. First, welcome to Clemson University and America's State Parks webinar series, a partnership between the National Association of State Park Directors and Clemson University. My name is Phil Gaines. I'm the retired director of South Carolina and current professor of practice here at Clemson. We're excited to have over 140 participants today. They represent over 40 states and 1 Canadian province. So, as folks still keep coming in, with that in mind, with over 140 participants, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. So, in order for all of us to be able to hear what's going on, if you could put your devices on mute. I know we said we wasn't going to mute that, but there's so many folks. Let's put all of our devices on mute, and we'll have an opportunity for open dialogue and engagement here in a little bit. But I know some folks are traveling in a vehicle. Some folks are in conference rooms. So we'll put everything on mute, and when it's time to have discussion, we'll open up those lines to unmute yourself. You will do that from your device. And if you want to do a chat, if you're Macintosh person, a Mac user, yours is at the top, and if you're a PC user, I think it's at the bottom. When you introduce yourself and chat, be sure to tell us who you are and what state or province that you represent. So here we go. We're excited about our very first webinar, and we picked what I think is a very timely topic with capacity issues. And capacity issues this time of year in state parks is something that I bet you're dealing with every weekend. So the very first time I started talking about capacity issues was in 1997 at Jones Gap State Park, where we were trying to make an initiative to protect the resource. So I got one of our graphic people to design this cool little cartoon figure about a state park entrance and how it was like waiting on tables and stuff. And so in just a very short period of time, that cartoon has really turned into an everyday occurrence, especially on weekends at some of our parks across the country. So carrying capacity over the years has certainly changed, but in most cases, it still ties back to the resource. The maximum resource use or pressure that a resource or a site can tolerate without degrading the very resource that attracted visitors to that place in the very beginning. So in today's webinar, we'll look at a specific case study involving a park and a resource in Maryland and what the Maryland Park Service has done to address the complicated challenges of managing capacity. So for years, park professionals has really determined capacity through parking spaces. The number of parking spaces determined and dictated when your park reached capacity. But as you know, and what we'll talk about today, that's really changed, as we now often deal with capacity issues well beyond the gates of the park. Here's an example of some capacity issues that they're facing in Texas and in Texas state parks. And you can see, while the park often fills to capacity, one of the bigger issues is not what goes on inside the gates, rather what goes on outside of the gates, with traffic concerns and traffic issues that impact not only the park and park visitors, but communities, resources, law enforcement issues that take place outside of the gates. So we're going to look a little deeper into what capacity issues mean for you, and that they're more complicated than just managing parking spaces as we've done in years past.
Texas state parks are our last wild places. They're our past and our future. But as Texas continues its exponential growth, our state parks struggle to keep up.
Hi guys, I'm sorry the park's closed right now. We're at capacity.
For us at Penn State Park over the last 15 years, the visitation has nearly tripled. While we love to see the people come out and get to enjoy their park, we do start to get concerned about both sustainability for the resource base, but also the quality of the experience that people are coming here for.
So it's Sunday of Memorial Day weekend at Ray Roberts Lake State Park. It's about 11 o'clock in the morning, and they're already backed up almost to the highway.
That parking down there is real full?
And this is typical as we get busier and busier each year as visitation increases. Even our non-holiday weekends, we're starting to back up as folks try and get into the park.
I love the expression of the lady on the van when she was told that the park is filled to capacity. So I bet you've seen those visitors' expressions there and probably heard some conversation from those visitors when they've been disappointed when they couldn't come in. So thanks to Rodney and his team in Texas for sharing that very informative video that kind of outlines some of the challenges that we have in facing capacity this time of year, but also as we approach the fall season as well. Today we fill up fast and early, and considering these new factors, we also have to look at not just examples of parking lots filling up like here in Michigan, but also the factors that go beyond the parking spaces like safety concerns, egress and egress of emergency vehicles, the social carrying capacities, the social issues that are associated with capacity issues, and of course, protection of the resource itself. And as you can see in these slides, defining capacity is complicated, and sometimes it's not even in our control. A lot of these examples you see on your screen now are from capacity issues once the park is filled, that cars park alongside state highways, U.S. highways, that park systems have very little control over from an enforcement standpoint of being able to keep people from parking on the sides of the road and entering the parks through non-traditional means. So it's not just about parking spaces anymore, it's a complicated thing. So one of the things that we want to do with our webinar series is try to mesh and give you some examples of what the science says and what the research says and how we're able to mesh and utilize those tools when we have to make real clear-cut decisions on the ground that often involve politics, communities, and stakeholders that don't quite understand why we had to close the park because of capacity. As park leaders, it is critical for you to have all the tools in front of you when making those difficult decisions. Dr. Matt Brownlee, Associate Professor of Parks and Conservation here at Clemson and a researcher nationwide in capacity and visitor use management, is here with us today, and Matt's going to take a closer look at what the research and what the science says in helping you to determine capacity at your park.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Brownlee. Thank you for allowing me the honor today to join you for a little bit on this webinar and talk through a little bit about what we know about capacity, at least from the research perspective. And instead of me showing a number of graphs and charts today and talking about research methods, I want to offer something a little different today. I want to offer some common vocabulary. I also want to offer a few concepts. And I also want to talk about some resources that I can point you to on the web that may help you in determining some capacity decisions or at least processes that you know. I want to start out by introducing the Interagency Visitor Use Management Council. And that council, although is a council of a number of federal land management agencies, the concepts that this council has come up with and processes and frameworks is very applicable and transportable, I think, to state parks and state park context. The Interagency Visitor Use Management Council is the National Park Service, the U.S. Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife, BLM, Army Corps of Engineers, and NOAA. And they got together and they created some common language and a common framework. You can find their material at a website, visitorUsemanagement.nps.gov. That's visitorUsemanagement.nps.gov. And specifically on that website, there's a visitor capacity guidebook. And I highly encourage you to look into that guidebook. I think a number of the processes outlined in that guidebook are very transferable to state park context. You know, we think about visitor capacity as Phil Gaines was talking about, as the maximum amounts and types of visitor use that an area can accommodate while maintaining the desired resource conditions in the visitor experience. There's a 5-step process that we often use when we're engaged as researchers with park managers in helping to provide information about visitor capacity. And that 5-step process starts with what we refer to as determining the analysis area. So for example, there may be a very popular waterfall at a park, and that waterfall is one that is contributing to high levels of use, perhaps because of its popularity, and park managers have identified that there might be a capacity issue, or that is contributing to a capacity issue. And so the analysis area would be that waterfall area, some geographic boundary surrounding that popular attraction site. Other analysis areas might be a popular beach. It could be a series of hiking trails. But defining a number of analysis areas within a park is really important, and then aggregating those analysis areas up to a park-wide capacity at a later time. The step 2 in that is to review existing information and knowledge, review existing data, and identifying the need for additional information. That's oftentimes where we come in as researchers into the visitor capacity assessing process, is to use methods like time-lapse photography to understand the frequency and timing of use and densities of use at popular sites, to be able to track that over time, days of the week, hours of the day. We use quantitative surveys often to understand visitors' impressions of existing and potential conditions. We use some GPS tracking technology where we're able to determine how far visitors are traveling, where they're going, how long they're spending in certain areas. And we also use some traditional methods like trail and traffic counters during this stage. Really what we're trying to do is assess the current conditions and then understand what potential conditions could exist if certain changes were made to variables within the park management system, such as adding new parking spaces or taking away parking spaces or adding a reservation system. Step 3 is what we call the limiting attribute stage, and that's where we ask park managers to identify and answer the question, what most constrains the ability of that analysis area to accommodate visitor use? Is the limiting attribute physical, such as the septic system in that area can only accommodate so many visitors? Is it managerial? Is that the limiting attribute, such as the amount of staff or ability to maintain safety? Or is it environmental or ecological, such as a endemic species that's very vulnerable to high levels of use? Or is the limiting attribute social or experiential, that visitors are feeling crowded and having a degraded visitor experience of low quality? So each analysis area has a limiting attribute, and that limiting attribute becomes really important because that is what can help determine the capacity for that analysis area. Step 4 is identifying the capacity. So then there's some capacity set based on that limiting attribute and the desired conditions for that analysis area, what that analysis area should provide by way of a visitor experience. And the information from steps 1 through 3 are combined into identify that capacity. Oftentimes the capacities for those analysis areas are rolled up to a park-wide capacity, where then that may be controlled through number of people coming to a gate or reservations or other types of management actions. That leads us to step 5, which is implement and monitor. And that's simply where a host of management strategies are implemented and monitored for their efficacy to see really if they're working. Are they attending to an increased quality of a visitor experience? maybe decrease stress on the resource or facilities, and how well are those management strategies working. And those management strategies are simply modifying different parts of the system, modifying types of use or visitor behavior, visitors' attitudes or their expectations or their timing of use, location of use, their spatial distribution of use, or the amount of supply, such as adding or decreasing the amount of parking spaces or access points to a popular river or things of that nature. Oftentimes nowadays we're also involved in research investigations where parks are trying different messages on social media, and then we test the efficacy of those messages to understand what changes are occurring on the ground due to those messages. And so we're really involved as a research community in this stage of implement and monitor and helping parks to understand how effective their management strategies are in attending to capacity issues. I want to leave you with two parting thoughts today before I turn the screen back over to Phil Gaines here. One is if the type and amount of visitor use conflicts or may conflict with the desired conditions for an analysis area, the types of experiences that you hope visitors are having in that area, the desired condition, then a visitor capacity is required. Number two is that visitor capacity should not be determined in isolation. And this goes with the old summer adage of don't go swimming alone. So visitor capacity should be something where if you're confronting capacity decisions, seek outside assistance of your agency, seek assistance within your agency. Think about incorporating all the elements that you need to in that capacity decision, such as your funding mechanisms and projections, your applicable policies, the unique political landscape that you work in, relationships with stakeholders, so on and so forth. One final thought too is that capacity is often an allocation, and it may be an allocation across different visitor groups where let's say at a popular lake, 75% of the use might be allocated to general day use, 10% might be allocated to overnight boaters, and 15% might be allocated to commercial use. And those allocations are determined through not only research, but management intuition and management experience as well. So that's a little bit from the research community and how we often are involved in the research process throughout these visitor capacity decisions, and how we help provide information that's not only defensible but based on sound practices and sound science, so you guys can continue to do the great job that you're doing in your parks.
Thanks, Matt. So one of the things that we want to do in our webinars is that we know that the day-to-day operations and you guys are front lines, and those decisions are very difficult. And oftentimes the decision is made at a higher level, whether it's director or the secretary or the agency director. And what science and research does, it enables you to have another tool in your toolbox to be able to go back and explain why you're making some of these decisions, validate some of your decisions when times get tough. But let's talk about real life scenarios. And what we'd like to do now is look at a case study issue, a fascinating case study that is going on currently in Maryland to address an issue of capacity at Kilgore Falls. And I'm excited to hear more about this from the Maryland team, and very pleased that my friend Nita Settina, the superintendent of Maryland Park Service, will take us through an interesting year of managing capacity at this special site. So Nita, I'm going to turn it over to you. You should unmute yourself, and if you can't, then I'm going to wave my arms around, and our help from Clemson will come over here and help you do that. But I'm counting on you to make me look good and unmute yourself and take off from here. Nita? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Got you. We can hear you. I can't. There you go. Now we got you.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Nita. And I'm going to turn it over to you and your team, and you tell us a little bit about how you manage capacity at Kilgore Falls.
Well, thank you, Phil. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting us to participate in this webinar. Carrying capacity is a significant issue for us. I see Rob Dyke, for example. He's our ranger and park manager of Tapsco. He's on this webinar observing. His park fills to capacity pretty much every weekend throughout the summer when it doesn't rain. To give you an idea, as many of you may be, we have 18 state park areas that fill to capacity throughout the summer months. Our worst year, we've been tracking this for about 10 years. Our worst year was 2017. It just didn't rain. It seemed like all summer long. And we filled the capacity 122 times that summer. And we're on track. We might not hit that many this summer, but for example, we filled the capacity 10 times this past weekend. So it's a new norm for us, and we tried something different at Kilgore Falls that we're excited to share with you all. Like so many of our parks in the summertime, the number one draw to these state parks that fill to capacity is water-based recreation, whether it's a river, a lake, or a stream even, and in this case, a waterfall. And Kilgore Falls is the name of the falls in Falling Branch, which is an area managed as part of a bigger park complex. And it's been drawing crowds for the past 10 years, creating a lot of traffic. As you can see from this picture, it's a lovely natural area, largely undeveloped. And we literally have people coming to this park from multiple states and overwhelming the park, overwhelming the resource. And as we saw earlier, that impact is spilling out into the local community, which kind of raised the bar even higher for us and forced us to rethink how we were managing that traffic. And so we decided to try something new here with our first ever day use reservation system, which was something, that we hadn't had any experience with, but we've piloted it in this, at this park and found some success. And I'm going to turn it over, I hope, to our park manager, who manages the complex of Rock Susquehanna State Park that includes the Falling Branch area, Ranger Andrew Hangen.
Nita, before we go to Andrew, I want to remind folks, if you're joining the call now, if you'll mute your phone or your device that you're using, we have a lot of folks on here. So if you will mute it, that'll be great. And so, Nita, I'll turn it back to you and Andrew.
Hello.
There he is. Hi, Andrew.
Thank you, Phil. I wasn't sure if you were going to see me or not. As Nita described, Kilgore Falls is located in a quiet rural area. It's only a 17-foot waterfall, but it attracts people from a long distance. It's located on a quiet gravel road. The community wasn't used to crowds. It's about a half-mile trail to get there, and a small parking lot of 30 cars, which is really about the right size for this property. Phil, can you flip to the next slide? If you look in this photo, you can see there's quite a few people there. It actually was getting even more crowded than this. In this one little area by the waterfall, we would have up to 400 people. This was quiet until the county tourism got involved and social media really just took off, and more and more people were finding out about the place. We started having impacts to the soil, to the vegetation, to the trails. Trash was increasing, and we were getting some pressure from the community to do something. If you look at this photo, you can see that the parking lot's not very big. It holds about 30 cars, which translates into about 75 people, which is a much more reasonable number. On the narrow gravel driveways and the roads, we had traffic backing up. People were parking illegally in people's driveways at a nearby church. The police and fire were upset because the roads were they felt like they couldn't respond to emergencies. And the local community was not accustomed to this kind of visitation. Here you can see some of the photos of the impacts to the trails. They became really wide and muddy from groups of people walking down together. Just here you can see the only park bench in the area is covered with flip-flops and trash. But it was an interesting experience for us. Everything really broke loose when the neighbor across the street was charging $10 a car to park there. And at the peak, they had 130 cars parked on their property, plus 30 on ours. And that turnover that parking lot turned over multiple times a day. So we're really talking about an awful lot of people down there. But that extra high visitation, all those people, if you think about 400 people a day posting on their Facebook account, photos of themselves in front of Kilgore Falls or about their wonderful experience, then that's obviously that was a major contributing factor to this issue. But we did do a survey. That was Nita's suggestion, and it turned out to be a great suggestion. We learned a lot about our visitors at that point. We found out that most of them were coming from out of state. Most of them were actually first-time visitors. That surprised us. And we learned they wanted to come from 11 to 3, and all of these things factored into our decisions down the road when we decided to implement this system. But and I'll let Nita tell you a little bit about this flyer that's up here.
So thanks, Andrew. I don't know how come your name didn't end up on this flyer.
I can tell you.
So this flyer, I know we can all relate to this. This flyer was actually developed by the neighbor that was charging for cars to park on their lawn, because one of the first actions we took was to try to contain that and reverse that opportunity, because it was creating so many visitors into the park. And so she created this flyer in reaction to our first major step, which was to ask the county to force the neighbor to discontinue parking the cars as a zoning violation. So while that was reducing the number of people that could actually get into the park, it pushed the problem, in essence, out into the neighborhood. As Andrew just described, we had a lot more illegal parking happening along street sides, and that enraged the other neighbors, who, of course, contacted their elected officials, which resulted in a public meeting with the community that Andrew and other staff attended to, hear what people's concerns were. And one of the elected officials actually introduced legislation to allow the agency to enforce parking violations outside of the park with civilian rangers to address the illegal parking. So we took these concerns seriously, and we came up with another idea, and that, of course, is reflected in this slide, which was our day use reservation system. And this was to pilot a parking reservation system that would restore the appropriate carrying capacity to the site, reduce traffic, and provide certainty for our visitors who were traveling a long way and were being disappointed by being turned away due to a full parking lot. Our goal with the reservation system was to keep it simple, keep it free, because we don't charge to visit this natural area, and make sure that it was something that we could easily administer so that it was sustainable from an operational standpoint. Day use reservations was something we've been talking about for a long time, primarily for our bigger parks that fill to capacity, that hold, 5,000 visitors on a Saturday. But we thought we would try this concept at a very small natural area and see how it worked. So I'll turn it over to Andrew to give you some more details about the reservation system.
Thanks, Nita. We tried to keep this as simple as we could. Right now, in order to make a reservation, you give the park office a call during the week, Monday to Friday, and we hold a spot for you. In order to increase the number of people that we could accommodate, instead of people coming from 11 to 3 like everybody wanted to do, we created 2 shifts, one from 8 in the morning until 2, and another from, until 1, and another from 2 to sunset. We've had lots of positive feedback from everybody, from the visitors that actually made reservations. We've had great unsolicited feedback, including emails. The neighbors have all been extremely happy with us. We had a legislator send us some positive feedback just recently. It's been, and even the staff, I was a little bit concerned about the staff because I didn't want to make it worse for them. And instead, it's been the opposite. It's been, the visitors have been understanding, even the ones we're turning away. And we've been giving them alternatives, and the staff seems to be much less stressed. If I would change anything, and that's something we're looking at in the future, I would try to somehow accommodate real-time reservations. So when a family decides they want to visit on a Friday night, they can log on to the internet and see if any spaces are available, and determine yes or no, and quickly make a reservation. And I think that would be a big help, because what we're doing here is we're actually trying to change the culture a little bit. Our camping visitors, our hunters, and our pavilion renters are all accustomed to planning ahead and making reservations. For our day use visitors, this is new for them, and I think it's coming along, and so far things have been going really well.
So I'll just finish up by saying that there was some skepticism that this was going to work. Just the concept of having to make a reservation to go to a park seemed anathema to how we normally do business. But the staff really did a great job planning and implementing this new reservation system. And so we just offer a few keys to success for you to think about. One is to allow ample time and to use all the communication tools available, including social media, to educate your visitors about the change, about the new reservation system, well before you implement it. It's certainly not the sort of thing you want to surprise people with. So I think we did a good job with that. We gave that about 2 months. We didn't spring it on people on a holiday weekend, that sort of thing. So that was important. Number 2, keeping it simple and in scale with your park. So with a 30-car parking lot, you can do this. It's weekends only, summer months only. You can do this with some phone calls to a park office. But for a bigger park, we're definitely going to need a mobile phone or internet-based reservation system. Third, for us, based on our survey, which I think surveying your visitors to get some of that core data about their visitation trends at the park and where they're coming from was helpful to us and influenced our creation of 2 shifts. So you can reserve for the morning, or you can reserve for the afternoon. And we made a 1-hour grace period in between so that we could be sure that parking lot opened up for the next reservation. And then finally, once we have reservations filled for the weekend, we put a notice on our website. We're starting to train people to check the website before they come visit and make sure that they can make a reservation. So we're going to, based on the success of this, the lines of traffic and the number of cars we're turning away is reduced dramatically, and it's just getting better and better. And I think it's even going to be, remarkable to the point where eventually, our staff commitment to this effort will be reduced. We're going to expand this day use reservation model to another small area. This one has a lighthouse, that has similar issues, same kind of parking lot size and so forth. So we're going to do that at that state park and work on a mobile phone app so that we can help Ranger Rob Dyke out at Patapsco Valley State Park, where he's got huge lines every weekend in a much bigger park, and take care, try to change our culture in the summer times anyway to address this problem. I mean, it's a good problem to have, right? We all know that. The Texas video I thought was right on, but it's a problem nonetheless. And I think we have to use these new tools and technology to address this new norm and protect the resource and protect the visitor experience and make sure that we're achieving our conservation and stewardship mission. So thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Nita. And I'm sure there's lots of questions that we'll have the group ask you and Andrew about how this worked. One of the things that I think that the Maryland case study shows that this is very complicated, and I think one of the successes they had was they did their homework, they did some research, and they started out small. But one of the things I think that we've seen around the country is carrying capacity issues is very complex, and it's not just about parking spaces anymore. It's about lakes, it's about rivers, it's about a lot of different things. Here's a slide or two of Devil's Fork State Park here in South Carolina, where the challenge is or access to the lake, but also the kind of balance between private vendors and outfitters and regular park visitors. So that's some of the things that we see. I think this slide is from Nevada, Tahoe, where you see what is the social carrying capacity of your sites and how do you determine that, and what may be okay for one group may not be okay for another group of being able to have fun in their parks. And then it goes back to the resource and how do you protect those resources and how much impact can the resource have to be able to literally pack people into the parks and keep them from being loved to death. And then again, the bottom line, in today's world of park management, we have to look beyond the gates to manage parks. We're part of communities. We're part of this economic engine that these communities depend on. And so the solutions we come up with have to go beyond the gates of the park and manage our parks as a system of parks. So how do we do this? And looking at some of the models across the country, I thought it's interesting of how things have changed in the last 20 years of how you close and when you close, and some of the models that are used. Some park systems use the park is closed, and one car goes out, one car goes in. Some park systems close for a period of time so that they can manage, because they're having to manage road systems outside of the gate. So they tell you not to return until a certain time. Another issue that has changed the way that we manage capacity is drop-offs and walk-ins. Again, it's not just about managing parking spaces, but about managing people and managing experiences. All this to say is that capacity issues are real. They're happening in every state and in a lot of your parks, and it's complicated. So, wow. What we'd love to do right now is hear some examples that you're having of how you're addressing capacity issues around the country, and also to open up and have some engaged dialogue about the challenges of capacity issues, what you're doing, some of the pilot projects that you've used, and also the opportunity to ask Nita and Andrew and her team some questions about how this process worked in Maryland. So I'm going to open the floor for discussion. So this will be interesting with 140 people. So I think the way this is going to work is that if you have a comment, if you talk, you unmute yourself, tell us who you are and what state you represent, and then ask the question and be patient and utilize the chat box if you're not able to get in. So we're going to open up the floor for discussion and questions. And to start that, all you do is unmute yourself and ask the question, and you should pop up on the video screen. We'll see how this works. So I'm going to open up the floor. So I'll start the conversation. Going back to the slide at Devil's Fork, where we have the issue with the parking lot's not the problem of being full all the way it reaches capacity. The problem is how do you manage this dock and the relationship you have with private vendors, and how do you have be able to manage the dock issue. So I'm going to ask the park director from South Carolina what's some of the issues that he's been exploring, because the former director of South Carolina never had any of these issues when he was the director. So, Paul, that was humor. So I may have to unmute everybody. That's why I not kick anybody in. Paul or Kevin, are y'all there? Can you help me here? Because I may not be there. That. What's this? Okay.
Phil, can you hear me?
I got you, man.
Okay, sorry. Complicated technology.
I tried to set you up, man.
You did, and I've been pounding buttons, but I finally got it through. So Devil's Fork, as Phil alluded to, we've had problems there.
Tell us who you are.
Okay, this is Paul McCormick, Director of South Carolina State Parks. Talking about Devil's Fork, which Phil has highlighted a couple of times in this presentation. And Kevin Evans is on the line, too. He may unmute and also chime in. But when I came up here last year, I was astounded by the number of calls, and Phil had them through the years, of visitors who could get into the park but then had problems getting their boat in the water because our dock was full of commercial vendors. So there was no dock space once they launched their boat to tie up and pick up their family. And for a single boater, if they couldn't tie up their dock, it meant our ramp was also tied up with a vehicle waiting to get pulled out of there when the dock got tied up. So I went up there last summer and watched the commercial vendors and the regular users kind of battle for space. And we did kind of like Nita alluded to at the end of the season, we brought all the players to the table. We tried to sit down with all of the commercial vendors and to address the problems, because they were also frustrated by our efforts up to date to try and control the access issue. And through the course of the off season, we developed a plan where we implemented a commercial vendor permit. We had to work with local Department of Natural Resources as well as Duke about dock access, and provided an alternate option for some vendors to get a permit that would let them get into the park and use an alternate boat ramp, and then to avoid the lines, and then be able to have a dedicated spot at the dock for them. By doing that, it prevented them from having to bring 8 to 10 boats in and tie up dock space while they waited on their rentals to come and utilize the space, and allowed people who were just coming for the day to have easier access to the dock. We also implemented, because there were so many people who were making a long distance drive for very limited parking, and would get there and would be turning around people. By this point last year, we had turned around over 4,000 users. So we put in some rental spaces that they can day use rental, essentially, like Nita alluded to. They can come up for just the day, rent a boat parking space so they can launch their boat and have a vehicle space to put their boat and trailer in. And that's also alleviated it. So those two efforts this summer have reduced the number of turnarounds by over 50%, which has really helped us, and the number of complaints has gone down dramatically as well. And we plan at the end of this season to meet with those users again and tweak the program to meet their needs. Kevin, I don't know if Kevin Evans, the manager at Devil's Fork, is on here. If he can unmute himself, he might be able to add something to that. Kevin?
Kevin's unmuting. Nita, one of the we have several chats has come up, and so we'll get back to Devil's Fork. And thank you, Paul, for sharing that. But it kind of shows that it's not just parking spaces. It's it's complicated things like permits for vendors and outfitters and those kind of things. Getting several questions, Nita, about the reservation system. and how y'all are doing this. And I think Texas has also chimed in and says that Texas has a new reservation system that is going to start taking advanced day use reservations up to a month out. So that's pretty new and cutting edge across the nation too. But tell us about your reservation system that you use specifically here at the Falls, Nita, and how it's different from your traditional reservation system.
So at Kilgore Falls, we kept it real simple. We didn't have a vendor online yet that could take those reservations. So we just take reservations by taking phone calls to the park office. We're just trying to fill a 30-space parking lot for typically a weekend. And so it's not real complicated. But the state does have a contract with an information technology vendor, and they are working on a mobile app for us to handle day use reservations, but it's not operational yet. So I'm real interested to look at Texas's day use reservation system. I wish in hindsight that when we contracted our campsite and shelter reservation system, we had included the option of day use reservations, but unfortunately we did not. But that will be something when we're ready to renew that contract and rebid it, that we will likely include as another service that we combine those things.
I see Todd from Texas is online. Todd, a lot of people are saying they're anxious at looking at the Texas model. New Hampshire's weighed in and said that they're wanting to look at the Texas model. Tell us real briefly what the Texas model looks like and how long y'all are using it and how you launched it successfully. Todd McClanahan from Texas.
Okay, can you hear me now, Phil?
Got you, man.
Okay. Yeah, so we went with the new reservation system. We launched it in February, and two big components was, number one, us going to site-specific reservations for camping, but then the other big part was the advanced day use. And we've got that now on mobile and through the web. And so you can go a month out. You can, at several of our sites, not all of them are as complex as what Enchanted Rock was, and that was the photo you showed earlier on with the lines way out. Sometimes most weekends throughout the year be a mile or two down the road. And Doug Cochran's he's on the webinar as well from Enchanted Rock, so he can probably add to it. But in the central part of the state, most of our sites have hit capacity on weekends, but here in the central part, we're every weekend year-round. And so a lot of marketing, like Nita had said, really helped through social media to try to train our folks. They've been asking for something because the frustration levels with surrounding landowners, emergency services, not being able to access our parks, or even get to their own homes. That created a lot of frustration. But we finally have worked through a lot of that and really started pushing people to use the app. And you can, we've also added what Nita had said earlier also about we have Twitter feeds on our websites for all of our state parks. And we really push them, and they don't have to have Twitter accounts to see those, but that's become the most efficient way for our parks to notify campers that we're about to reach capacity, or they can go now on their own and see at any given time slot entry how many permits are still available. You can still do walk-ins, but we encourage them because a lot of folks are driving 1 to 2 to 3 hours to come out for the day, and we encourage them to visit the website or go and see before they make that drive if we are at capacity, and if not. A lot of times we'll hit weekends and we'll tell them proactively that all slots are full for Saturday and Sunday morning. We still have some slots available Sunday afternoon. So we use that, and it's been very helpful.
So a couple questions, Todd. So do y'all charge? So you charge a fee for a reservation for the day. Is it an additional fee for a reservation, or would it be the same one as if you drove up?
No, it's our same entrance fee, and they pull up and they have the opportunity to print their own permit. We require a permit to be on the vehicle, and so they can pre-print that, and they show up, and we scan them in, and we show it so that way we can get our accurate visitation count and verify that that's who it is. Or if they don't, when they come to check in, we ask what their name is. If they had prepaid reservations, we pull them up on the site, print their permit, and get them on. It's not, so that's just the entry times. Each of our sites are a little bit different. We know at Enchanted Rock, the average stay is about 1 to 3 hours. And that's why I think we have 5 different entrance times for that park. And then some other parks may only have 2. Some of our river parks, when they hit capacity for the day, the folks are there all day long. And so we'll close down for the entire day based on, at some of our sites, it's really based on parking, but we're trying to work on a bigger carrying capacity project to see what the true impacts are on and how to quantify those impacts on the resource.
Right. So, Paul, in South Carolina, did y'all do an additional charge for the vendors for use of the dock permit at Devil's Fork?
Phil?
Yes.
This is Paul. Yes, we do charge an additional fee for the vendors. We do a monthly fee, and we had it available for the first 4 vendors. We met with all of them, and we're charging them $600 a month. And then they keep track of their users that come into the park, and then they reimburse us for their user admissions fee.
Okay. A couple of the questions that we're getting from some of our folks on the chat line is dealing with the ability to charge entrance fees and not charge entrance fees. And one of the comments, I think, Nita, you responded to that y'all did not charge an entrance fee to the larger park, and for this park you thought it was in the best interest to get this up and running that you not charge. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, this was your, Kilgore Falls. As you all saw, it's a small natural area with a small parking lot, not the kind of place most of us would typically charge a fee. So we did not want to discourage people from the new reservation system. We thought, let's make this as positive and as easy as possible and not introduce a fee where there was no fee before. Now, we may need to rethink that with some of our bigger parks where you may charge, we charge $5, $6 a person on a summer weekend to come into that park. We're certainly going to keep that. And whether or not our vendor is going to charge a fee on top of that, a vendor that is managing a reservation system for us may charge a small fee to take that reservation on top of that. Is something that we're going to have to look at.
Yeah. So I was fascinated. A couple of years ago, I went to Nevada and went to Sand Harbor on Lake Tahoe. And I see where you have responded that Sand Harbor, Lake Tahoe in Nevada is going to be going to day use reservations, hopefully next summer, and the capacity issues y'all have there. And if I recall, when I was there, one of your capacity issues goes outside of the gates where people park on the sides of the roads that you don't control. So will y'all be charging an additional fee for a reservation at Sand Harbor at Lake Tahoe? So I'm not sure we're going to get through to Nevada, but I thought it was interesting on the chat line, if you're able to see the chat line. At Sand Harbor in Nevada, they fill 528 parking spaces in 60 minutes, with lines backing up almost 4 miles on a one-lane road to get in. And that so complicates managing a park when you have to deal with the things outside of a park. So I was just curious, and I think a lot of people were curious about what that fee would be. Would it be an additional fee?
Hey, this is Alan. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, I got you, Alan. Go ahead.
Oh, perfect. So yeah, once we go to the system for the online reservation, it'll be just all online, and there will be a fee attached to that to make your daily reservation for that. The other big issue is we don't allow any walk-ins or drop-offs. There's no shoulder at all to walk in. We have a 3-mile one way and a 1.5 miles the other way, no parking zone surrounding the park. So we do run a shuttle through the Tahoe Transportation District into the park to bring even more people in that we don't have the capacity for. And June 28th, they open up a $40 million 3-mile multi-use path that ends at the park, bringing additional people in that way. So we're having multifaceted issues getting into the park now, and capacity issues.
Very interesting. As we still get a lot of comments coming on the chat line, one of the things that I'm finding interesting about this is that I think we're seeing capacity issues really becoming so critical that a lot of states are taking positions now of going to what we thought would never happen, and that's taking reservations for day use parking spaces. I see we're in Tennessee. At Cummins Falls, they are getting ready to start a reservation system for parking for day use there as well, and they will charge for a permit as well. So a question we have, what type of receipt does the visitor receive, and how is this processed if the internet is not consistent? Well, based on what we're doing with this webinar, I can't imagine the internet not ever being consistent and being able to be used correctly. So that is a challenge, and some of the parks that we have throughout the country are in areas that make it very difficult. So that's part of the process, and I think going back to Nita's point earlier of changing that culture and changing what visitors' expectations are and educating visitors of our role in stewardship and service and protecting the resource and managing visitors is critically important. And I think that, it is important to do that research, look at the science, and develop those campaigns that talk about why you're taking these, what some people may think are extreme measures, so that I can go see a park that I've always been able to visit to. Kenny from Tennessee says Cummins Falls won't be a parking permit. The permit will gain visitor access to the River Gorge. Understand. So yeah, the internet access is a critical issue, and one that I think that we'll have to look at from time to time. One of the things that I've heard a lot of people talk about is, so what's the big question about capacity issues and how we manage those? And I think one of them that is beyond the operational things is the value of public lands and green spaces, and particularly areas where population growth is extreme, like some of the examples you've seen in Texas. Certainly in the southeast and in the northeast, we've seen a lot of that. So it's not just operational issues, but it's looking at ways to manage protection of public lands and access to public lands. So does anybody else have a comment or a question? We'll get better at this with technology and figuring out better ways to do this. So we've reached our hour. So one of the things I'd like for us to do is kind of wrap up a little bit and talk about what we've experienced today and what our next steps are. So the goal, before I go to that, I'm reading these things. It's a very good one. Is there a list of resources or publications regarding the science and research of capacity available in addition to what was listed on the visitorUseManagement.nps.gov site? So one of the things that we want to do here at Clemson is provide you with some of that information, some of those resources. And what we'll do after this webinar is I will send Louis Letford, the Executive Director of NASPD, kind of a summary of what we talked about with capacity today, with some of those links and discussion items that we talked about. Certainly the links for visitorUseManagement.nps, some other things that Dr. Brownlee and the university could find where you could find more information about managing capacity and what are our next steps. The most important thing, I think, from today's discussion is that we have dialogue now. And if you're participating in this webinar for the first time, all of a sudden you feel like that you're not out there all by yourself. And there are really proactive things that are going on across the country to when you start to have real decision-making time to go talk to the secretary or to the agency director or to the governor or to a legislative delegation. One of the things that you're able to talk about now is that you've had discussions with people all across the country who are dealing with the same things that you're dealing with, and some of the models and some of the ways that they're using to address capacity issues. So this is a good forum to start that dialogue. And what we'll do is our next email is encourage you to reach out to people who are doing things and have more discussions like this and forums that we'll be able to discuss not only carrying capacity but other issues that impact the management of America's state parks. So here's some tentative dates for future webinars. Our next webinar will be September 30th. Louis Lepper will be sending more information out about the webinars and soliciting your input and ideas for what would be good webinars. We'll get better at these webinars and figure out some of these kinks of being able to manage this many number of people so that you can be able to engage in conversation. Love the chat line and learned a lot of information from that. So look for some information coming from Louis. We really appreciate and excited that you were involved in the first webinar for the NASPD and Clemson University. We look forward to many more. And between now and September, think about what we can talk about with webinars. I'll see you in Arkansas at the NASPD annual conference, and go Tigers.